So from pilot strikes and gold medal glory to global finance resets and one of the biggest tech handovers in South African legal history, today's news is all about who's losing control, who's seizing it, and who's finally being held to account. My friends, this is Daily Bagel, the only morning news show that you need to kick off your week on the right foot. Let's get into it. And kicking us off with current affairs, there we have it, folks. More than 200 FlySafair pilots are reportedly going on strike for the next 2 weeks. But the airline insists that flights will run as normal. So how's this, right? So this strike, which is led by the union Solidarity, was originally planned as a one-day action over these wage disputes and rostering issues. But after FlySafair issued a 7-day lockout notice in response, Solidarity said fine, and they extended the strike to 2 weeks. Talk about the art of de-escalation. They claim that the pilots are fighting for industry standard pay and more predictable rest days, not just bigger salaries, but quality of life protections. So now the union says that almost 90% of its members have voted in favor of the strike, warning that as a result of this, no flights can be guaranteed. FlySafair disagrees though. They say that only some of the pilots are participating, that backup crews are in place, and that most passengers won't be affected. This week though will reveal who is correct here. So talks with the CCMA remain on the table, but there's been no breakthrough just yet. The strike begins today and ends on the 5th of August, unless of course things escalate further. And honestly, what has started off as just a simple pay fight has now morphed into a standoff over control. And next up, it's official. Meta, the company behind WhatsApp and Instagram, has agreed to hand over private user data to South African lawyers after weeks of legal pressure over these accounts distributing explicit content involving school children. So social media legal expert Emma Sudler and her team uncovered over 60 accounts posting graphic videos and photos of minors. Now Meta took some of them down but refused to share identifying information. And now that led to a court battle and eventually a settlement where Meta will now supply names, email addresses, phone numbers, and IP data. So yeah, for the first time in South African legal history, Meta has agreed to hand over user data under a court order to help identify people distributing explicit content involving South African school children. Now this is a landmark step in a fight against digital exploitation, and a signal that these tech platforms can't turn a blind eye to illegal activities taking place on their apps. And as for the parents or teens trying to make sense of this online minefield, Emma Sadler's book Selfies, Sex and Smartphones might be the best place to start. And on to our quick fire mentions. The city of Cape Town has just unveiled a 25-year plan focused on jobs, housing and climate resilience. Now public input is open until September and big changes are promised across transport, energy and safety. Home Affairs is finally speeding up for our expats. You see, new global service centers in Australia and New Zealand have reportedly cut passport turnaround times from 18 months to just 5 weeks, with more centers rolling out soon. And Eskom is facing a nearly 1 billion rand penalty after losing a court case against French nuclear supplier Framatome. Now it's over delays and disputes at Koeberg, and the ruling could quite literally impact future upgrades and finances. And on to our finance section. Look, there's been some confusion online with people thinking that the G20 Leaders Summit just took place. That's not correct. What just wrapped up in Durban was the G20 Finance Track, which is like this behind-the-scenes series where finance ministers and central bank bosses meet to try and tackle the economic agenda before the main event. So South Africa hosted this round, and while the US didn't send its Treasury Secretary or the Fed chair, it was still in the room represented by senior officials from both institutions. So while the big names skipped it, the country technically didn't. So the big win here was that all 20 countries finally agreed on a joint statement, something that's become rare. You see, they backed strong central banks, fairer global trade rules, and flagged the usual risks: war, debt, climate disasters, and shaky supply chains. They also made progress on key projects: how to fix debt in poor countries, speed up cross-border payments, and get global tax rules working for everyone. So the final finance meeting happens in October, and then the full G20 summit kicks off on the 7th of November November in Johannesburg. A shareholder power struggle is brewing at Quantum Foods, one of South Africa's biggest egg and poultry producers, as Country Bird and Braemar sign a deal that could block rivals from seizing control of the company. And Stellantis is going local, announcing a 3 billion rand investment to build Peugeot Bakkies in the Eastern Cape. The plant will serve both domestic and export markets as part of the group's African expansion plan. And on to our sports section. My friends, it is with great pleasure that I get to say that our Junior Boks have ended a 13-year title drought in style, beating New Zealand 23-15 in the final of the Under-20 World Championship. So look, it was a gritty stop-start match in the brutal heat, but South Africa struck early with a driving maul and closed it out with a late clever chip and chase try in the corner. Now Flaha Vusi-Moyo held it together with 3 penalties and 2 conversions as the Baby Boks out-defended, out-disciplined and ultimately outlasted their biggest rivals. So this win caps an unbeaten tournament run and marks the Junior Boks' first World Cup title since 2012, a team that included the likes of Pollard, Kitself and Peter Steff. Now for captain Riley Norton, who also played in last year's Under-19 Cricket World Cup, which is seriously impressive, he said this for him was redemption. And for South African rugby, it's just another jewel in the crown. Springboks and now Junior Boks, both reigning world champions. And on to our quick fire mentions. On that note of the Springboks, the Boks beat Georgia 55-10 in Nelspruit, running in 9 tries despite a rather scrappy display. Now debutants Marnus van der Merwe and Bowen Venter both scored tries in their first match, which is always awesome to see. Banyana into the WAFCON semi-finals after a 0-0 draw and a 4-1 shootout win over Senegal. Goalkeeper Andile Dlamini pulled off 2 key saves to keep South Africa's title defense alive. And look, Sundays don't go your way. Our very own Kevin Lorena was outclassed by England's Lawrence Okoli in the heavyweight bout at Wembley, with all 3 judges scoring in favour of the Brits. And as expected, before we continue, here is something to chew on. In 2024, what was the busiest domestic air route in South Africa? Was it A, Joburg Cape Town, B, Durban Cape Town, or C, Joburg Durban? Bonus points if you can guess how many passengers travel this route, rounded off to the closest million. We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. And on to our wildcard section. My friends, I get it, Mondays are rough, but unless your car exploded, your bus crashed, and you got blown out of a plane this morning, you're still doing better than Frane Selak. So in 1962, the Croatian music teacher was on a train that derailed into an icy river. He managed to swim to shore while 17 passengers drowned. A year later, the door of a small plane blew off mid-flight, and he was reportedly blown out and somehow landed in a haystack while the other 19 died in the crash. Then over the next few decades, he survived a bus crash, multiple car accidents, a head-on-head collision with a truck, and being hit by a bus. Oh, and one of his cars randomly caught on fire while he was driving. Then, in 2003, he won the lottery. Some called him the world's unluckiest man. Others say that luck was all he had. Either way, if your Wi-Fi is slow this morning or your Uber's just cancelled, at least you didn't get blown out of plane. Stay safe out there. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is the Joburg Cape Town route. According to the OAG's global airline schedules data, it's South Africa's busiest domestic air route with over 5 million seats scheduled last year. Now, according to the OAG, it's not just the busiest in South Africa, it's the busiest in all of Africa. And my friends, that's it for today's show. I must admit, I am heavily under the weather at the moment with a flu. So this is your reminder to take your vitamins, drink lots of water, and stay away from your sick friends. You know who you are. Guys, have a great start to the week, and I'll catch you all same time tomorrow. Cheers.